good afternoon. Hello, and thank you very much for having me here today moderating this panel. It is such an honor. Well, today it's COP29 Tourism Day, and we want to talk here about how islands are laboratories for understanding, but also developing innovative and accelerated approaches for decarbonization and resilience due to the complex interplay of environmental, social, and also economic sustainability. Moreover, their isolated nature often amplifies the importance of key factors contributing to both unique challenges and also opportunities. In particular, we want to know how touristic islands can be decarbonized, since today, as I said before, it's COP29 Tourism Day, and also how to best ensure sectorial engagement to strengthen the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action. For example, the Canary Islands, represented here by Julieta Schallenberg, are already leading the way with a climate action plan. So to discuss all this, we have here today several sectors represented and also several oceans and seas. For example, we have Pau de Vilches from the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean Sea, Julieta Schallenberg from the Atlantic Ocean, Canary Islands. Also, we have Joayel from the Caribbean Sea, representing St. Kitts and Nevis. And also, we have Thierry Le Breton from Mauritius Island from the Indian Ocean. So, specifically, Pau de Vilches Moragues, he has a PhD in International Environmental Law. Also, he's an associate professor of the University of the Balearic Islands, and he focuses his research on the intersection of climate change, environmental law, and human rights, devoting special attention to climate litigation. Also, he is the Deputy Director of the Interdisciplinary Lab on Climate Change of the University of the Balearic Islands, and Chair of the Climate Change Committee of the Balearic Islands, too. Julieta Schallenberg. She currently serves as the Deputy Minister for Ecological Transition, Fight Against Climate Change and Energy in the regional government of the Canary Islands. Also, she has a PhD in Environmental Engineering and Desalination from the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria in Canary Islands. Joayel Clark from St. Kitts and Nevis. She is a dedicated environmentalist and biodiversity conservation advocate. She currently serves as appointed member of parliament as minister with responsibilities for sustainable development, environment, climate action, and also solid waste management. Also, she has advised and mentored with leading NGOs such as the Global Foundation for Women or Women Empowering Girls. And finally, we have Thierry Le Breton. He's a consultant in sustainable transition for territories and industries. He's a pioneer in CSR strategies within the main business of Mauritius and for two of the main groups of resorts in the country. He launched the B Corp certification in the Indian Ocean, and Thierry's background is also from being an NGO founder and activist over the last 20 years. He's the founder of the Indian Ocean Islands Foundation, which has for mission to accelerate the emergence of socio-ecosystems in the island states. So we are posing two questions to our panelists, and then we will have some time for questions from the audience. So I'm going to sit with you to ask the questions. So, which measures do you think are more important to decarbonize your archipelago or islands?
So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think that the case for each island is different, but I guess that there are some similarities among islands. For instance, in the Balearic Islands, we have two main sectors that are responsible for more than 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and those are electricity generation and transport. Transport accounts today for more than 60% of our emissions, and this includes airplanes, shipping, and also land transport. So if we really want to contribute to the struggle against climate change in terms of mitigation, it is key to address both those sectors. And although it might look easy to start with, it isn't. And unfortunately, reality is always stubborn. And so, for instance, as regards decarbonizing electricity, one could say, well, we just switch from fossil fuel generators to renewables, but as an island, we are a limited space, and therefore people who have suffered for decades of the consequences of mass tourism now are extremely sensitive to the destruction of the natural environment when we want to put solar energy, for instance, or not even talking about windmills. I mean, you mentioned windmills in the Balearics, and everyone looks at you, stares at you with so big eyes, which is a pity, because we need renewables, and we need to do it well. The problem is that we haven't had an informed conversation. And this goes also as regards transport. Everybody is taking their own car. And even in small villages of 1,500 people, everyone moves with cars. And it would be so easy to change this. Of course, there's a much bigger challenge in relation to air transport and maritime transport. And this is linked to tourism. Unfortunately, we're receiving more and more tourists, and we are breaking records year after year. There's only 1,200,000 persons in the Balearic Islands, but we are receiving more than 30 million passengers per year, which is just too much. But since we have built our economic ecosystem around tourism, now people seem completely not unaware, but unable to think of an alternative. They're scared of what the alternative should look like. So I think we should really try and build trust and explain and make it easier for people to change to other sectors. Agriculture, clothing, construction, not in terms of new buildings, but in terms of retrofitting buildings, knowledge through universities, etc., etc. But as I said, it looks easy when you say it, but it's becoming so difficult, which is frustrating given the situation we are all living in.
Yeah, I think we share many problems among Balearic Islands and Canary Islands. So, Julieta?
Hello, everybody. Good evening. So I think we really have a lot of things in common, probably with the rest of the islands here in the panel also. We are also a touristic archipelago, 2.2 million inhabitants, but more than 16 million tourists per year. 40% of our territory is protected. At the end of the day, we have a really what we will call like a fight for the territory. We need the territory to diversify our economy, but we need the territory to give homes to the people. We need the territory to give hotels to the tourists. We want to do agriculture. We want to do industry, and we want to do renewable energies. We have a plan to have 100% renewable energy system in the electricity mix for 2040, which is very ambitious and probably difficult to achieve. It's a little bit like the Balearic. 1/3 of our energy consumption goes to the electricity mix. The rest is mostly transport. And so we came up with these ideas that we reflected in the new law for climate change and energy transition, where we gave priority to those renewables that will work in co-using the space and land. In this sense, we have been the first region that has posed the obligation of 100% roof on new buildings and buildings that are completely retrofitted. This is something novel in the national law, the Swiss regional law now. We have also given a high priority, not just in terms of law, but also in financing. We are devoting nearly 100 million euros for what we call PV on already existing infrastructures, like, for example, agrivoltaic, which is a combination of photovoltaic and agriculture. So in that sense, we also giving some extra revenues of farmers. We think that it could be even a way of promoting that land, that agricultural land that is not being used, is going to be used in the future with this scheme. That's where we are hoping for, because we also have a very low food sovereignty of around 6%, which is very, very low. But also, which is photovoltaic in parking spaces, photovoltaic or floating PV on dams, floating PV on water deposits. So everything which is photovoltaic on already used infrastructures. So, but along with photovoltaic, we cannot do it. We know it. So at the same time that we are fostering this kind of PV that is, let's say, not land invasive, is not using extra land, we are developing what is called in European terms the renewable energy acceleration zones that comes from the directive of renewable energies of the European Commission, approved last October. And these zones should be the ones devoted for wind farms and also for PV farms, but at a smaller scale. The work there has been intensive. It's been intensive. We have not approved the zones yet. But we are working with all the sectors. With agriculture, we are taking into account all environmental limitations, biodiversity, all the constraints that we can imagine. We are talking all together to define these areas with the objective of having enough areas for renewables for 2030 to achieve what we call around nearly 60% of renewable energy penetration, with both schemes, the non-land intrusive and the acceleration zones, which are going to be territory. They will use some territory, but somehow it's a territory that has been pre-evaluated and is in consensus with the society, the local administrations, and also with, which is very important for us, the environment and the society. So that's our way forward to achieve this decarbonization of the electricity system. It's not easy. We are islands. We need a lot of storage, and this is also one of the drawbacks. We will always be isolated. Balearic is somehow interconnected and will increase probably their interconnections in the future. The Canary Islands will always be isolated, and already with 20% of renewable energy penetration, we already have 7% of curtailments. So it's a big challenge because we have to invest massively in storage systems. Our main impulse here is hydro pumping station. We already have one island that is completely decarbonized or is on the way to, with a wind hydro pumping station. So we see that as the storage system that is more ecological and more environmentally friendly in the Canary Islands, and we try to replicate this at a bigger scale in some, and at least 3 or 4 more of the Canary Islands. So thank you.
Thank you, Julieta. Yeah, for sure, being an outermost region of Europe makes things difficult for Canary Islands, but we are here to talk about opportunities, so let's focus on that. Joyel, please.
Right, thank you. So for St. Kitts and Nevis, our NDC commitment was 100% renewable in the energy sector by 2030. So our two challenges or opportunities to decarbonize would be through energy generation and also through the transportation sector. And we are following along the lines of our regional partners, CARICOM, in terms of the EV policy that should be introduced to incentivize transition to electric vehicles. Of course, that it also requires an upgrade of our infrastructure, training, capacity, strengthening to ensure that we have the requisite technical skills to support that transition, and the tax incentives to ensure people do so, because currently, without government incentives, it would be extremely expensive to purchase a hybrid or even an electric vehicle, but the policy is allowing for such to happen. with the energy sector, because we do have tremendous opportunity with our geothermal reserves in our sister island of Nevis, and the opportunity is beyond even the capacity that St. Kitts and Nevis need. I mean, I think I won't get the technical terms wrong, but I'll try. We just need about 10 megawatts, but the potential is upwards of 150, which can generate electricity for neighboring islands, including overseas territories and Puerto Rico, etc. So the investment potential is there, and the incentives to do so, it's clear. So that's our biggest boost for transition. If the Minister of Energy were here, he would say that based on the studies we are seeing, 100% renewable is the intention and the ambition, but it's the transition also. So for now, we are working towards solarizing much of our government sector, decarbonizing that with our regional partners. We're decarbonizing the public sector in particular, and then working towards decarbonization options for SMEs, especially women-led SMEs, and we're hoping that we have the right energy mix while we transition. That's important. It's the most expensive part of any family's budget, providing for your electricity bills. And we're hoping that the transition, while it meets our NDC targets, it also supports livelihoods and supports stronger families, because they have less income to expend on electricity. So that for us is the two ways in which we can work towards decarbonization for St. Kitts and Nevis, and then hopefully with the geothermal reserves we can work towards decarbonization in our region.
Thank you, Yael. Very, very interesting. About 2030 is very close, so maybe you will tell us more later, but very interesting and ambitious. Congratulations for that. Thierry?
Thank you. So, yes, what's happening to Mauritius is a bit the same type of pattern that we have heard just before. It's a small territory and remote island as well, disconnected from far continents. And we're also one of the highest density in the world as a country. And so it's a lot of conflicts of usage on a scarce territory. This being said, islands indeed they are important greenhouse gas emitter per capita, mostly also due to their imported products. We depend a lot of importation. 60% of greenhouse gas emission in Mauritius are related to importation in any case. And of course, And for the other part, of course, the energy sector is the biggest producer of greenhouse gas. For the energy sector, it's about 50-50 between transport and local local electricity production. For the electricity production, it's 18% of renewables and 82% of fossil fuels. And in the fossil fuels, even it's about mostly heavy fuel, and the other part is in coal. So it's very interesting to understand that in a country like Mauritius, there is one electricity supplier, which is a government body, which is a company that is owned by the government. But there is 50% of the production that is private, made by independent power production, power plants, and they are. And these independent power productions, they are like 4 or 5 big companies, and there's also a relationship of power and of historical power between the old colonial families and the new independent government. So it's also a relationship of bargaining between communities that are not exactly the same, from same origins. The government being mostly driven by people of Indian origin, while the independent power productions are from European type of families. So there's also this that is in the bargain. So it's really hard to address the decarbonization issue already from this political situation and perspective. And the independent power plants, they produce energy out of bagasse for a part, like 30% of their production is from bagasse, which is the fiber residues from the sugarcane production, from the sugar production. So they cut the sugarcane fields and they produce sugar, and the bagasse is burnt for energy production. But this is only part of the year, so for the rest of the year they use coal, and the government want them to discard the coal on a horizon of 2030. So it's a big question now for them to know how they will substitute this coal with other fibers, if we need to import pellets, for example, of biomass. And this is another question, if we will have enough resources to substitute, because we can't produce enough biomass in Mauritius just to change into the coal. So this is a big question, for example. And now the other issue normally would be to decentralize the production of energy as well, which is, for example, the type of thing that I will be much more in favor of personally, and to have a very strong decentralized power production for Mauritius. But the Mauritian government is very proud to have one of the best energy supply in Mauritius. Among all African countries, because we have a 24/7 power supply. We have normally the demand is about 500 megawatt, and we produce about 550. And for the government, the priority is always about the competitiveness of the economy, and the development and industrialization first. So they really don't want to put that at stake, and until they are very comfortable that renewable energy will be completely safe to support the competitive economy. This is when the moment then they will be able to take some moves. But to decentralize production, this also means to change completely the grid system, because it's a grid that is very organized for one supplier. So this is a type of situation that is at stake in the question. And to end on the transportation side, for example, is another issue. For example, the same type of situation like others. The urbanism in Mauritius hasn't been thought for have been thought only for car usage. So we always use the mileage on a car in Mauritius is as high as a car in Spain per year. So we always drive for anything in Mauritius, and on small islands it's not flat like a big city like Barcelona or Madrid or something. So there's a lot of reliefs as well. So people don't want to take bicycles for 2 kilometers. You know? So it's not so easy to change the habits in Mauritius for that. So in the end, to answer your question, how to do what choice for decarbonization? Eventually we could consider to improve the regionalization of production, to relocate the production in the Indian Ocean and to depend less from far importation. But unfortunately in Mauritius only we can't be self-sufficient with local production. The country is too small. We need to rely on Madagascar, on the other islands around. And but the cooperation at the regional level is really bad, because each country has a different trajectory and are on different development level, and the threats among these islands is very high. It's higher to have 1 ton being transiting from one island to the other than to import from Hong Kong or whatever, because the freight is very costly, because we don't have the economy of scale. So this is a big question as well. So that's mainly it for the first question.
Thank you, Thierry. Well, yeah, we have a crazy orography too, so I know what you mean about not using bikes. It can be very hard in the Canary Islands too. So, yeah, and we also share the percentage of renewables. It's similar. And of course, importation. It's great you mentioned it, because we have to rely very much on importation for many, many things. and it's also increasing the scope 3 of our carbon footprint. So, yeah. Now we more or less know about the islands in general and decarbonization. So we are going to focus in the touristic sector now. So the second question is how the touristic sector contribute to decarbonize your region, if it does, and also what can you do to support tourism in your region in this context of climate change? Pau?
I mean, if you want to start with the other so that we can change also.
Yeah, I thought the same, but I don't know if Thierry, if it's too much or you want to go.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm very happy to answer to that question. If you remind exactly the sense of your first question here, the best answer would be to stop tourism, because this will be the best way to how the tourism can decarbonize the industry, the island, because there's no other way. Even if we consider regenerative tourism, like the best regenerative tourism possible, we still be carbon positive. We won't be able to be carbon negative. We rely on planes and on everything, you know, and we will still depend on importation products in the end. So. Let me give you a little anecdote about this. During the COVID, of course, the whole, like everybody everywhere else, tourism was completely shut down. No tourists at all during 2 years, etc. And there are some little tourist operator, like boat operators, a lot of little activities like this that were completely dependent on tourists, who couldn't have any revenue during 1 year and a half. So they were in great despair. So with an NGO who is involved in lagoon conservation, who are very involved with those people, we decided to organize a workshop for them to find alternative revenues in this context. So after 1 year and a half, more than 1 year, 14 months, we had this workshop, and we were still completely alone on our island, completely disconnected from the rest of the world. And at some point of this discussion, they told me that they agreed to tell me that indeed they were completely in great despair without no revenue, but they were so happy to rediscover the island the way it was in their childhood when no tourists were there, and how beautiful it is to reconnect with the nature and to see the lagoons being regenerated. And so it was terrible for them, because they had to acknowledge that that they were doing an activity that was necessary for them, but they could also notice the impact of this activity. So it was a very challenging moment. So this is a very good, interesting anecdote. But in Mauritius, tourism accounts for 25% of the GDP. So to get rid of this like this, it's really not a solution, at least in short term. So, and this is 25%, including the indirect impacts, indirect positive impacts. So the first thing we can think about for tourism decarbonization, of course, is planes, but we can't do without the planes. And actually, for small and developing states, there is kind of an acceptance of still using planes, because we depend on that to support the SDGs related to development. We can't do without it. So we are not being as much under stress like the big countries when it comes to planes. That's the way we could. So eventually we can consider the passive buildings eventually, but this is another good question as well, because most of the hotels in Mauritius are like 4 or 5 stars hotel, and there is a level of source of quality that needs to come with it. For example, the star rating system in Mauritius, as it is applied by the government, for example, mentioned that each room for a 5-star or 4-star hotel need to have an air condition, for example. So it's like a tick-the-box system. So if you don't have your aircon, then you can't claim to be a 5-star hotel. But so how to do like a very rude, nice and luxurious type of hotel, all wooden and passive building, etc. And so this is already a concern, for example. And most of these hotels are developed right on the beach. So they are big concrete hotel on sandy dunes, and the erosion are really coming towards the hotel. Each year the beach is just reducing, and now there's no much more place to lay down on the beach. So it's the whole business model in the end that is questioned because of that. So actually the big threats of the hotel is not so much about how they are going to decarbonize, but how they are going to manage the land surface on which the hotel complex is built up, because they are now, in 5 years from now, they will eventually need to demolish the whole hotel and to completely rebuild it like 20, 50, 80 meters more further inland. But the problem is that there's a coastal road just behind the hotel, so they will be squeezed on the hotel coastal road. So there's a big question because of that. So this is for passive buildings and how to consider the development of these hotels on the coast. And so eventually now the alternative for decarbonization for the hotels is to focus much more on buying local. So a lot of hotels claim to buy local, all the foods, etc. But still they have some exceptions. They want to make some exceptions. You can't do a hotel without imported wine, for example. Or some are reluctant to take out the salmon, for example, on the menu. So it's always things like this. So they try to do some buying local, at least 70% of their products or something like that. And they try also to develop program with regenerating forest in association with hotels. So to invite tourists to go to places where that they are contribute to regenerate in the lands. So that's mostly it. This is so far the best we are doing in Mauritius, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. I have many questions, but I will wait until the end because I don't know if we will have time. So, Joyelle?
Right, so for St. Kitts and Nevis, the cruise sector contributes, tourism in particular, contributes about 52% of our GDP. So it's so hard for me to agree with you to say stop tourism. I mean, a lot of families would suffer, but I understand the point. How you get to our islands is the one major part of the problem. And how you interact when you're on our islands becomes the second part of our challenge. So since you focused a lot on the hotel industry in particular and presented some very good case studies, I'll transition a bit to our port facilities and the conversations that our Minister of Tourism has been having about how we regenerate our port facilities and really move beyond powering our crews when they're in dock at our shores, from fossil fuel generated energy to solar generated energy, and we're investing quite a significant sum in ensuring that our port facilities can offer that renewable option for the cruise ships when they do dock. Interestingly, some of the new the cruise lines are now transitioning even their operations to solar-powered operations, and with the interest in geothermal, green hydrogen. So there is potential, and we're in talks about what can happen in the near future. But the truth is, for the tourism sector, for us to decarbonize tourism, the tourism sector, it's a question of how do we manage the 1 million, for us it's just not just 1 million visitors to our island, and it's a lot because we're only 50,000 people on both islands, so it's significant. When you come to our islands, you're driving around, and you have to drive around in vehicles that also are contributing to the problem. So it's transitioning those small livelihoods to EVs and providing the incentives for them to do so. Soft loans so that the taxi drivers and tour operators can transition. When you get to our islands, you are then taking another boat to go and snorkel or see our coral reefs. And we have programs which allow our visitors to be part of our conservation efforts, which is good. But it's also every activity that you do as a visitor contributes to carbonizing our world. So we've recognized that a critical pivot for us to decarbonize the tourism sector is re-educating not just our local population, but the visitors who come. So when you hear about St. Kitts and Nevis, apart from it being a wonderful destination for you to relax and to recover. It's also a destination where you can be more conscientious as a visitor, where you can support our reforestation efforts, as you mentioned, where you can be part of our conservation efforts and our education program, where you can adopt spaces. So that re-education, and then we're going for I know a lot of persons say, oh, you're greenwashing tourism and it's not real, but you have to do something. So we're now looking for more conscientious travelers, and this means going after visitors who have a little bit more money, who could spend more on high-end boutique hotels. So we've moved away from inviting the concrete structures on our shores, and we have decentralized, so to speak, our tourism product into the rural areas, a whole venture deeper product. So our last hotel, that was Kittishan Hill, it's a sustainable destination. Sustainable construction, completely local workers who constructed a hotel, farm to table, sea to table, ideology around eating, and we're encouraging all of our investors to consider that model, consider the mangrove that you want to be near to, consider the forest, consider the community, and we recognize that it's a holistic package that's going to take us to decarbonizing the tourism sector and eventually connecting it with improving livelihoods. Because as much, and I say I am the Minister of Environment, so I am all about meeting our NDCs, protecting our environment, conserving our environment, minimizing waste. We've signed on to MARPOL and Basel Convention. We're not taking your waste. You have to deal with your own waste, etc. So it's pollution, marine pollution, environment. But I recognize too that people won't care about the environment if they're hungry. People won't care about the environment if they can't feed their children. And if I have 90% of female-led households working in the tourism sector, then for them to care about the environment, their job security must be confirmed. So it's making sure everything connects to keep livelihoods and to protect the same environment that these livelihoods depend on.
Nice, great point. Yeah, I totally agree, and we have to. Yeah, we are all touristic islands. We know our GDP is very dependent on tourism. So if we want to change the model or transform it, yeah, we have to be careful about people that work in tourism sector. So thank you for mentioning it. Julieta, please.
Very, very interesting, everything what I heard. I think I will not repeat what Thierry already said because I think we are exactly in the same point. I'm very glad to hear that some islands have nicer examples as what I can tell in the Canary Islands. I think we are still very massive tourism, and we should shift to other directions, but it's not going to be easy. Besides of what have been already said, and I will go back to that, but first, we are already doing some things that had not been mentioned, and it's a little bit on protecting our population, but also the tourism from the climate change. So we are, as government, we are working in adaptation, especially in two things regarding the sea level rise and the heat waves. Both things are affecting both population, but also tourism. At the end of the day, we end up in 20 years with no beaches, probably our tourist sector, which will be much more smaller, and that will be a way to decarbonize it completely. But we don't want to be so rough, so we are protecting our coastal areas with adaptation measures. They are quite expensive measures because everything what you do in the sea to prevent sea level rise, I mean, you cannot prevent it. What you can do is to prevent that it invades the coastal areas, the roads, and the people houses. So all these infrastructures we need to develop are quite expensive. So that we are working on that part. We are working also to have alternative when there is a heat wave, alternative to places to go, but also things so understandable as building PV infrastructures, the coastal areas, so that when you go out of the beach, because it's very, very hot, so you can go to the promenade, and the promenade is not as hot because it's even more hot because cement is, but you have a shade. So this kind of infrastructure make it easily if it's a heat wave and then you go to the promenade to escape, then you have a shadow. This kind of infrastructure we promote, and then to have a PV roof on top of that, so we're just doing renewable PV shadows, let's say that. So that's what we call is a climate refugee with PV. And this is something we are promoting in the Canary Islands. So we are promoting them effectively also with incentive. Now we have opened the call, and we have a lot of projects, as I said, in that area of various dozens of millions of euros. So this is something, I think, particular things we can do to protect. But on the other side, I mean, this is things to adapt. And these are things that we can do so a little bit to mitigate the effects of the climate change. But I completely agree we need to do much more. We need to decarbonize the tourism sector. Of course, we can ask for more awareness, more sustainable tourism, but I think on the governmental side, we have to be a little bit more categoric on the things we are doing. I think we have to protect our citizens, our islands. As you mentioned, after COVID or during COVID, we saw a lot of biodiversity in the sea rising, things that we haven't seen for many, many years. Dolphins, turtles, a lot of sea marine life arriving nearly to the beaches, which has not been seen like forever. So this is a sign. It's we can return. Not everything is lost. I mean, if we do the proper things, we can recover part of the biodiversity. But if we don't do it, we will lose it definitely. So in that sense, I'm quite proactive to have strong measures when it comes to biodiversity, marine biodiversity conservation. And I think we have to begin to stop giving permits to some activities. And this sounds very strong. And when you say it in the context of a touristic archipelago, it sounds very strong, and there are a lot of people that are going to disagree, and there are a lot of people that are going to protest. But I think at the end of the day, if we don't do that, we are not going to have the sustainable and beautiful destination that we should keep. So for that, I think we have to to have a strong measures now. I'm talking about prohibiting things that are happening now in our seas, like sea motorcycles. I don't think they're needed. Even in 10 years, so we have to pave the pathway to have a decarbonization in the sea sector. And maybe we have to begin now with the small ships, but maybe we have to have an aim to have normal, conventional ships along the islands in 10 years. So we have to have this roadmap. And I think we have to be we have to take really decisions that are not easy to take, because there's a lot of criticism there. But I think we have to move there. And we have to say, okay, if you want a permit in 10 years, either your ship is electrical or you will not have one. So we cannot do it from one day to another, because that's obvious we cannot do that. But we have to already establish long-term goals to show a little bit where we are going and to prepare the sector where we are going. That's not easy. But I think this is the kind of decisions we have to make at one point in time, and I mean now, showing the path, and also being strict in the sense that we need to change things, because we have to preserve our islands. And that's the first duty I think we have as government. Thank you.
Thank you, Julieta. Yeah, if we do not preserve the territory, of course, nobody will be visiting us in the future, and it's not only that, but yeah, that's a huge point. Pau?
So thank you very much. Since I think we're very much aligned, let me be also a little bit bold. And in a phraseology that might remind you of Game of Thrones, I mean, change is coming, whether we like it or not. Change is coming whether we make change, and so things are better for everyone, or change is coming and things will be much worse for everyone. So it is key in our messages to society, to everyone, to be so clear that we won't be living exactly as we live today. Either we like it or not. So, and we need to think outside of the box. We cannot keep on doing the same things with other technology because it won't work. So this could take hours as a conversation, so let me just introduce one element, one perspective that I think is key if we are to convince most of the people who depend mainly on tourism and other polluting activities. And this is justice. This is equity. I mean, in Europe, the 10% richest own 60% of wealth. In the world, the 1% richest owns 40% of the wealth, and the 11% richest owns 80% of the wealth. I'm convinced that if we are to address in a fair way all the changes that are needed in the way our system works, the way our economy works, the way we move, the way we eat, we really need to tap into those resources that are there, because otherwise it would be impossible. I would leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. So I don't know if we have questions from the audience. See?
I think I would like to kind of ask all of you to think about how you could also work together. I mean, I know you're oceans apart, literally, in this case, but there's differences and yet there's similarities. So I'm just thinking, you know, how could you kind of collaborate as islands, you know, or island states, you know, to kind of, in a way, because I remember when we were preparing this session, the idea that your laboratories, you know, you really can show the way. And I think this is really important, that you could be the innovators in many ways between you, but also for others. So just some thoughts on how this could happen.
If I may just say something. I work in a European project that's called Clean Energy for EU Islands, and it tries to build together with island communities all around Europe. I mean, we selected 30 islands that aim to be fully decarbonized by 2030, and there are 2 islands from the Canary Islands, there's the Balearic Archipelago, but there are, I mean, islands all around Europe. And I agree that we really need to go beyond this European regional perspective, because we share so many challenges. Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks.
Thierry, I can see you want to talk.
Well, this is honey to my ears. Of course, this is everything I'm looking for. This is why I'm trying to develop a foundation, because I feel so alone in Mauritius, trying to, because I think it's essential. There's a paper from a scientist, a Mauritian scientist, which is a friend of mine, who is an ecologist and who explain how Mauritius led the history by being one of the first ecological disaster of modern times. Because I was saying to Pau at the beginning of this, just before we started, Mauritius was a complete virgin island with no local population only 400 years ago when the first people arrived. And the first animal to disappear in the modern history was the dodo, because of this is why we say dead as the dodo, because of human because they introduced the rat, which is an exotic species, and killed all the eggs, etc. So, and like 80, like in 400 years, 98% of the land surface was changed by human activities. So there's 98% of the land surface of the island that was touched by the hand of a human. So it's like there's nothing original on this island anymore. And what is interesting is that it's completely documented historically. So we have all the historical evidence of this ecological disaster. So this is why I think it's very important to. My big question is how we can develop a socio-ecosystem that is completely that regenerate endemicity on the island, but including human culture. So I think we need to also invent island to retrieve, to reinvent island culture that makes the culture of the islandese endemic to its ecosystem. So how we can really retrieve this to be a regenerative society for the islands where we are. So this is a big question. So indeed, so if you were a historical disaster, we definitely can be historical innovator as well, I suppose. So I definitely think that, and I would be really happy to keep the collaboration with on this direction. And I totally also to agree with Pau about the question of just another thing on tourism, just to understand how a nightmare it is about fair transition and justice. In Mauritius, there is no more people to work in the existing hotel because Mauritians are yes, since COVID, nobody wants to work in hotel. Also in Mauritius, so existing hotels now operate at 80-90% of their room capacity because they had to close some of their rooms because they don't find enough labor to work in the hotel. But yet they still want to develop new hotels. So it means that they are going to import labor from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from wherever you want, from Sri Lanka, to work in the hotels. And the rhetoric, the narrative is always about it's important to support economic development, so to create jobs for the people, etc. But it's completely stupid because they don't need to create jobs for no one because everybody. So this is typically a narrative that is completely crazy and that explains that this narrative is false. It's only about rich people be willing to be richer. So definitely we need to another culture and civilization in our islands.
Completely. Yeah, I just want you to know that we have just 5 more minutes. So if you want to talk, it's fine, but 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think it would be very nice to have like a sustainable tourist island association or something like that. You know, like a label where you can categorize yourself as a sustainable destination. But in order to do that, you have to like fulfill a lot of requirements. Because what I have seen till now is there is a movement that you can move towards something if you want to achieve something, and sometimes the decisions has to happen top down. And I know this is not very something that everyone wants to hear, but at the end of the day, we know, we have 2 islands in these clean energy islands, and one of them was a marvelous island until a couple of years ago. There's no roads in this island, so there's just sand roads. There's like 200 people living there. Now in the port, you can directly put in the port VV because all the householders there are vacational houses. First, now there are more cars than people there. I don't know how the cars reached the island, but now we proposed a lot of things. There's one village, and we proposed, okay, maybe you can do like a PV parking, like bounding the village, and so the people can put the cars there and have a charge. No, but you know, if in somewhere else they can put the car at the front door, I have the right to do the same. Maybe we can put some water fountains. Sorry, if somewhere else people can drink in plastic bottles, I have the right to do that. So at the end of the day, sometimes what you have to do is come up with brave measures or top-down measures and say, by regulation, now, this is the way it should be done. Because sometimes it's like we all want more, and we cannot learn from others' faults. That's what I have seen so far. We all want to repeat the same mistakes. And that's what we see here in the COP. Nobody is like, oh, wow, that happened there, so I will learn and I will not repeat. No, we want all to have, and I have the right to do the contamination now, and I have the right now to. So I think we have to think out of the box. I said that yesterday, and I think we have to really rethink things and make it happen in some way. Something that normally works, not always, is to have people like labels. This could be a project, like say, okay, Sustainable Association Zurich Island label, and when you do all these things, you become a little bit more sustainable. Maybe you are there, and we will like it. But we have to come up with something. And in the way we all sharing we are far away. We are very far away from Europe and aviation. We are working, for example, in ways of producing sustainable aviation fuel in the Canary Islands. We don't know if our critical mass in waste will be enough to put a factory in place, but this is the kind of things we try to do in the aviation. But even if we do all these kind of things, I think we need to have like brave decisions. Sometimes I'm begin to prohibiting certain behaviors.
If I can say really quickly, just three options off the bat. I think it's important for island nations to convene. I think it is important. I support your point about sustainable island destination labeling. And I also believe that we should prioritize local indigenous knowledge. And this is something that we heard 30 years ago. Like, the locals have the answer, and you really need to pay attention to the answer. And when we focus on not extracting, but sharing knowledge from those who live most proximate to island nations, island resources, then we can come up with solutions to your question. And when we convene as island nations, it's not often that a Caribbean island will sit on a panel with EU, etc. So, but we have to create these spaces, and this is not a cheap bid, but that's why St. Kitts and Nevis decided that we're going to host Global Sustainable Island Summit next year in May. And we don't want just the Caribbean. We want all nations to come to St. Kitts to hear, to learn, to showcase, and to partner. And then when we have the opportunity, we need to support the island agenda. It is not necessarily prioritized here at a COP space. So at some point, we need to determine when are we going to have that, carve out that space for island nations to talk about outside of SIDS, which is just every 10 years. When again are we going to sit and talk as island nations, Africa, Pacific, Caribbean, EU? That's what needs to happen.
Great. Thank you. I think we don't have much time left, so if you want to pose another question, I think we will be here for a while, so you can ask later. Thank you very much. Also, just one small idea. Maybe we could do a mini COP just for islands. It could be nice. So let's think about that. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.